Do you ever just like stand at the base of a massive skyscraper, look straight up, and realize that thousands of tons of steel and, glass and concrete started as literally nothing more than a few pencil strokes on a piece of paper?
Yeah, it's honestly kind of a completely insane leap of faith when you really sit down and think about it.
Right. I mean, you are translating this fragile two-dimensional geometry into, well, physical gravitational reality.
It completely defies logic. And it requires an entirely distinct, specialized way of thinking. Like the physical building itself is really just the final
It's
artifact.
just the result.
Exactly. The actual creation happens, long before the first load of concrete is ever poured.
I always assumed an architectural drawing was basically, I don't know, a glorified instruction manual, like a literal objective picture of what the builders need to assemble.
Right, like an IKEA manual for a high rise.
Exactly. But the core argument of this source is that architecture is totally inseparable from visual language. Like, architects aren't just designing physical spaces. They are, they're basically inventing ways of seeing and thinking through space.
Well, yeah, because a building is just too complex to be conceptualized any other way. I mean, you simply cannot hold the entirety of a modern structure in your head all at once.
Right, there's just too much going on.
Way too much. You're dealing with the structural load of the materials, the sequence of human movement, the way natural light penetrates a room at, 4:0 p.m. in December, not to mention the HVAC systems, the proportion, the scale.
Yeah, like try explaining the exact atmospheric reality of walking into a massive cathedral using only words.
It's impossible. The words just bounce right off the sheer scale of it. You'd end up with like a 1,000-page novel just to describe the lobby.
And obviously no engineer could ever actually build from a 1,000-page novel.
Right. So visual language drawing, diagramming, graphic hierarchy, that becomes the necessary bridge. It translates the highly subjective imagination of the designer into a shared actionable reality for the clients, the city planners, and the contractors.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit because I want to look at how that translation actually works at the very, very beginning of a project.
Yeah, let's do it.
So the text emphasizes that drawing is a method of inquiry, not just a recording device. And I initially struggled with this, I'll be honest.
How so?
Well, if drawing is an inquiry, doesn't that imply the architect doesn't actually know what they're designing when they start?
Oh, they often don't.
Oh.
And I mean, that's actually the beauty of it. A drawing doesn't just show what a building looks like. It actively asks what the building is capable of becoming. Yeah, honestly. Many of the ideas literally do not exist until the pen hits the paper.
So it's kind of like writing a really messy first draft of an essay.
That's a great analogy, actually.
Like you aren't writing to record your fully formed thoughts. You are writing to figure out what you actually think in the first place.
Exactly. The act of drawing is the thinking process happening in real time.
Okay, but if drawing is this messy, subjective inquiry, how does it ever become a reliable blueprint? Because I thought the whole point of an architectural drawing was to be an exact, objective reproduction of reality.
Well, let's test that assumption for a second, because what's fascinating here is that an architectural drawing is never a complete reproduction of reality.
Ever.
Never. In fact, if a drawing showed absolutely everything, every pipe, every shadow, every single texture, it would be just as confusing and overwhelming as reality itself.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah, so drawing fundamentally relies on abstraction.
So it's basically like taking an x-ray. Like you completely ignore the skin, the muscles, and all the organs purely to see if the bone is broken.
That is a brilliant way to look at it. Take a standard floor plan, right? Which most people listening are probably pretty familiar with.
It's looking at the layout of a house online.
Right. But a floor plan is actually a rather violent abstraction.
Violent. How so?
Well, the architect essentially takes a saw, cuts a horizontal slice through the entire building at waist height, removes the entire top half, and just looks down.
Oh, wow. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah, they intentionally suppress the height of the ceilings, the drama of the vertical space, the lighting, and they do all of that purely to highlight the arrangement of the rooms and how you physically walk between them.
So by actively hiding certain truths, you reveal the specific truth you're actually trying to understand.
Exactly. And conversely, a section drawing slices the building vertically.
Right.
Which completely ruins your understanding of the floor layout. Like you can't tell where the kitchen is in relation to the living room at all.
Because you're looking at a slice of the wall.
Right. But it brilliantly reveals the structural layering, the height, and say how light drops down from a skylight. Abstraction is literally the engine of architectural understanding. You have to strip away the noise to isolate the variables.
But that level of abstraction introduces a really fascinating dilemma, which the text dives into pretty deeply.
The ethical side of it.
Yeah, exactly. If drawing relies on selectively hiding things to highlight others, then the choices an architect makes aren't just technical anymore.
No, not at all.
They carry immense cultural and frankly moral weight. Because what you choose to omit matters just as much as what you include.
It really does. Drawing is basically a form of highly curated storytelling. It projects authority.
Right.
And to understand this, you just have to look at how different historical eras used abstraction to articulate their specific worldviews. Like during the Renaissance, architectural drawings were obsessively focused on geometric purity and, divine proportions.
So the drawing style itself was basically an argument.
Yes. It was arguing that architecture was this discipline of human reason and mathematical order.
It wasn't just a picture of a church. The drawing was the philosophy.
Exactly. And then, if you fast forward to modernism in the 20th century, their drawings suddenly emphasized radical clarity, stark lines, and this total removal of historical ornament. So the style of the abstraction literally tells you what that culture believes is most important.
But here's where it gets really interesting, because as you mentioned, there was a serious ethical tension here. Since drawings are selective, They possess this incredible power to persuade, to exaggerate, and honestly, to obscure reality.
Oh, absolutely.
It sounds identical to like an Instagram filter.
That's exactly what it is.
Right. You curate the lighting, you crop out the messy laundry pile in the corner of the room, and you present this flawless version of reality just to convince your followers you live this perfect life.
Yeah, and architects do the exact same thing with renderings.
Those beautiful photorealistic images they use to pitch a building, right?
Exactly. I mean, you could render a proposed public plaza drenched in this gorgeous golden hour sunlight, filled with happy families and lush trees, implying this generous, vibrant public life.
But the actual physical design might be, what, a desolate, windswept concrete slab that actively discourages anyone from hanging out there.
Precisely. Or, a presentation board might frame a perspective shot from this impossibly low angle to completely hide the fact that this massive new skyscraper violently dwarfs the historic human-scaled neighborhood right next to it.
Oh, wow. So where's the line between pitching a compelling vision and just outright manipulation? Because let's be real, architects have to sell their ideas to clients.
You do.
If you don't pitch the dream, you don't secure the funding, and the building never gets made. So how do they balance that?
It is a profound responsibility, honestly. The source argues that the most potent persuasion is ultimately grounded in coherence and integrity.
Okay.
A visually intelligent architect is also rhetorically intelligent. They understand that when they draw, they are entering a discourse about what society values.
Right. So a drawing's clarity shouldn't become a tool for manipulation.
Exactly. Like, if you use a beautiful, sleek, abstract diagram to intentionally mask how a building functionally segregates people or excludes the public,
Which happens.
Which totally happens. If you do that, you are making a moral choice under the guise of a graphic one. Clarity should never be weaponized into deception.
Man, that's powerful. So, okay, if a fully fleshed out rendering is basically a rhetorical argument, like a persuasive essay trying to sell a vision, what happens when the audience isn't a buyer looking for a dream?
You mean someone who needs the actual functional data?
Right. Someone who needs cold, hard logic to figure out if the building actually works. I'm thinking about like a modern airport or a mega hospital.
Oh, yeah. The complexity there is staggering.
Right. You have surgical wings, emergency trauma traffic, public cafeterias, these massive HVAC networks. A golden hour rendering is utterly useless if you were just trying to figure out if the ambulance bay is going to crash into the food delivery route.
And that is exactly where the diagram becomes the most powerful tool in the architect's arsenal. Because if a rendering is a poem, a diagram is a mathematical equation.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, it is architecture reduced to its pure internal logic.
Because the text makes a really sharp distinction between a full drawing and a diagram. Like a drawing tries to capture multiple spatial realities all at once, but a diagram ruthlessly isolates just a single specific relationship.
Yes, it strips away everything else.
The text mentions a few key types, like you have circulation diagrams, which just use arrows to show how people or vehicles move through a space, and massing diagrams, which they ignore all the windows and materials and just show the building as basic solid blocks just to explain its sheer volume.
Right, it is the ultimate exercise in intelligent reduction, because a good diagram avoids any surface detail that distracts from the core mechanism.
So the perfect analogy for this would be a subway map.
Oh, totally.
Right. Think about the map of the London Underground or the New York subway. It's entirely disconnected from geographical reality. It doesn't show you the actual curves of the streets above, the topography of the land, or even the real distance between the stations. It violently distorts reality purely to show you the internal logic of how to get from point A to point B.
And it has to. Because if a subway map were actually geographically accurate, it would be completely illegible. It would just look like a plate of spaghetti.
But I have to challenge this whole concept of intelligent reduction for a second.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, architecture is an experiential art form. It's about how a space makes you feel when you're in it. Doesn't reducing a beautiful, complex building to a bunch of sterile bubbles and arrows do a huge disservice to the art of architecture? Like, doesn't it strip the soul right out of the design?
I get why you'd think that, but if we connect this to the bigger picture, it actually protects the soul of the design.
Wait, how?
Well, diagrams are never meant to replace experiential drawings, right? They support them, they anchor them. Because in a design review or a client pitch, an audience will inevitably get distracted by atmospheric details.
Oh, sure. They'll start arguing about the color of the brick.
Exactly. They'll argue about the brick color or the shape of a window. But if the fundamental organization of the building is flawed, none of those surface details even matter.
So the diagram forces the conversation onto the essential logic.
Yes. It proves the why and the how before you ever debate the what.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So let's look at the sheer volume of information we've discussed so far.
It's a lot.
It is. The architect has their messy inquiry sketches, their X-ray floor plans, their highly persuasive renderings, and their ruthlessly logical diagrams. Now, they have to actually pin all of this up on a wall or put it on a screen for a presentation.
Right, the terrifying part.
Yeah. How do they prevent the viewer from experiencing complete cognitive overload?
Well, they deploy graphic hierarchy. And honestly, this is the secret weapon of visual communication. It's something professionals in any field need to understand.
Not just architects.
Not just architects. Because without hierarchy, every single line, every label, every texture on a page screams for attention at the exact same volume.
Right, the text defines graphic hierarchy as the strategic ordering of visual information so that eye knows exactly where to look first, second, and third. It's basically a tool for managing cognitive load.
Yes. It guides the viewer through the narrative of the project. And the primary tools for this in drawing are line weight, tone, and contrast.
Okay, break that down for me.
So, in architectural drawing, the elements you are physically cutting through, like a solid concrete wall, are drawn with the thickest, darkest lines,
Okay.
while background elements are drawn with faint, whisper-thin lines. Or, you might use a heavy, dark tone to render a massive, solid structure, and just leave a single, bright, white void to immediately pull the human eye to the entrance.
And layout plays a massive role here, too. Like, you don't just throw images on a board randomly. You sequence them.
Exactly.
You might place a massive evocative perspective, rendering dead center to capture the emotional hook, then flank it with clear, logical diagrams to explain the concept, and tuck the really dense technical floor plans lower down for the engineers to scrutinize.
Because graphic hierarchy is essentially an act of empathy for your audience. You are saving their brain from having to work too hard to decipher your message.
And this translates directly to, anyone listening right now who has to build a pitch deck or write a dense report or design a marketing presentation for their boss.
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
Bolding your main takeaways, using bullet points, playing with font scale. These aren't just aesthetic choices to make it look pretty. They are cognitive tools.
Yep.
If you hand your boss a 10-page wall of gray text, their brain simply rejects it. You have to tell their eye what actually matters.
And you must adapt that hierarchy based on who is actually reading it. Visual language is highly strategic.
What do you mean by that?
Well, if an architect is handing a drawing set to a contractor on a job site, that contractor does not want atmospheric shading or poetic conceptual diagrams.
They just want to know where to put the wall.
Exactly. They need thick, precise line weights and hyper-clear dimensions.
Right.
But a community board reviewing the project needs the exact opposite. They need those evocative perspectives and simple diagrams to understand the impact on their neighborhood.
That makes total sense. But, the text issues a pretty massive warning here about the tools we use to build these presentations today.
Oh, the digital software trap.
Yes, because we live in an era of incredible digital tools. You can use every color palette, infinite line weights, hyper-realistic 3D shading, complex textures. The temptation is to use all of it.
It's so hard not to.
And that leads to the ultimate pitfall, over-explanation.
It is the most common trap, especially for students or, younger designers. They want to prove how much work they've done, so they just cram every single detail onto the board.
Right.
And the result is just visual fatigue. There is no hierarchy, just a bunch of competing focal points.
I mean, I encounter this constantly in corporate presentations. People think more data equals a stronger argument, but it really just creates visual noise.
Yeah. Clarity requires restraint. The text points out that selective omission is actually one of the most powerful tools of good communication.
Knowing what to leave out.
Exactly. Knowing what to leave out is actually a sign of mastery.
Let me play devil's advocate for a second. The source makes a really sharp distinction between graphic style and visual intelligence.
Yes, it does.
It says you can have a highly polished, trendy, beautiful drawing that is completely conceptually bankrupt and illegible. But in a world driven by social media algorithms and viral TikToks, flashy and loud usually wins.
Unfortunately, yeah.
So why shouldn't an architect develop a wild signature aesthetic if it grabs attention and wins commissions? Shouldn't a presentation be flashy?
This raises an important question, but the answer is that form must serve meaning. Style isn't irrelevant, right? Every architect develops a unique voice. But if your signature aesthetic obscures how the building actually functions, you haven't solved the design problem.
You just decorated it.
Exactly. The strongest graphic work is actually the most disciplined, not the loudest. This is why the text advocates for studying and redrawing historical masterworks, not to just copy their surface style, but to dissect their composed underlying logic.
And there's a deeper consequence to this too, isn't there? Because if your drawing is a chaotic mess of style over substance,
Yeah.
it doesn't just confuse the client, it actually compromises the building itself.
That is the crucial insight here. Representation feeds backward into design thinking. If you are laying out a presentation and you suddenly realize you have a hierarchy problem, meaning you can't figure out which drawing should be the focal point, it almost always means your architectural project has a conceptual hierarchy problem too.
Oh, wow. So if your explanation is cluttered, your idea is cluttered.
Precisely. You literally don't know what the main idea of your own building is.
That's incredible.
The way an architect organizes their visual language dictates what they can see and therefore what they are capable of designing. It is an active design tool, not just a post-production filter applied at the very end.
So to bring this all together for you listening, visual language in architecture is a rigorous intellectual discipline. It's not just rendering pretty pictures for a real estate brochure.
Not at all.
By utilizing deliberate abstraction, isolating logic through diagrams, and orchestrating attention through graphic hierarchy, architects manage to tame an almost unimaginable level of complexity.
They do.
They literally build the structure in their minds and on paper long before a single shovel ever hits the dirt. So the takeaway here is profound. The next time you have to communicate a complex strategy or a thorny idea at work, think like an architect.
Love that.
Don't just dump raw data onto your audience. Abstract strategically. Figure out what needs to be hidden so the core truth can be revealed. Simplify the internal logic into a diagram and use visual hierarchy to guide their attention.
It makes you wonder, though, about the future of all this.
What do you mean?
Well, for centuries, our physical spaces have been shaped by the limitations and the specific logic of two-dimensional tools. Paper, pencil, T-squares, and now flat computer screens.
Right.
If architecture is fundamentally constructed in the mind through these specific representational mediums, we are on the precipice of a massive paradigm shift.
Oh, you're talking about the move away from flat screens.
Exactly. Just consider the rapid emergence of fully immersive digital tools like virtual reality and AI-generated spatial environments. We are fast approaching a point where architects will no longer have to translate three-dimensional thought into a two-dimensional line, only to have a builder translate it back into 3D space.
You will simply design natively inside the immersive 3D environment.
Yes. And if the friction of that translation disappears entirely, how will it alter human spatial thought? will our brains, freed from the logic of the flat page, begin to conceive of and build entirely different kinds of worlds for us to live in.
Wow. It fundamentally changes that leap of faith we started talking about.
It really does.
Instead of moving from a fragile line on paper to a physical brick, we might literally be pulling generated dreamscapes directly into reality.
It's a completely wild frontier.
Well, thanks for diving into this complex visual world with us today, and we'll catch you on the next one.